Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of Sustainable Advancements, Dr. Nayan Mitra, and my team, Sana, Brindaa, Khushboo, and myself, Aakriti, extend a warm welcome to all our viewers and to our guest expert for today, Prarthana Borah, for an interview on Sustainable Development Goal number 13, which urges for urgent climate action. Without further ado, I would now like to take a few minutes to introduce our guest, Prarthana. Prarthana Borah is the director of Clean Air Asia in India, which is an international not-for-profit headquartered in Manila that works towards better air quality in over 1,000 cities in Asia. She is currently actionable for climate because she is working on air quality assessment of Indian cities. Furthermore, she is leading a capacity development program for training of decision makers on air quality management. She brings along with her 20 years of diverse work experience as an environmental sustainability strategist. Prior to joining Clean Air Asia, she has been involved in policy support initiatives of Center for Environment Education, like preparation of Government of India's policy document on climate-friendly traditional practices of India for the Climate COP21 in Paris. She was also engaged in policy documentation for UN Biodiversity COP15 and for the negotiation of the SDGs by the Government of India at United Nations. Pratna, we welcome you again, and we are really looking forward to unleash your knowledge capsule today and learn immensely. And now I would like to hand over to my team, Sana and Brinda, to start with the interview. Thank you, Pratna.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here with so many youngsters.
Thank you, Aakriti. So my first question for you is, ma'am, I recently came across this article which stated that out of 15 most polluted cities in the world by IQ Air 2020, 13 cities are from India. What do you think is the reason behind this? And are the producers or the authorities not following the protocols?
Thank you, Sana, for this question. And I'd like to actually approach this in a different manner. I had a look at the IQ Air report, and they have a website. So they kind of looked at 106 countries, which is around about 80,000 data points, because this is ground level data that is assessed, and based on that, the ranking is done. If you look at it, if you go into the data a little deeper, you will see that the top 20 countries are mostly from Asia. And the only Asian country that has a green air quality index is Japan. And we all know how strict Japan is on air quality standards and protocols. So what I wanted to tell you is that we ourselves did a survey of about 465 Asian cities, out of which 406 were developing cities, rest were developed cities. And we found that 99% of these cities have unhealthy PM 2.5 levels. So what I want you to understand is that we're not talking about whether Indian cities are bad or good or they need to work further. What we need to discuss is not a comparative, but are we doing enough? And what is this enough? If you're looking at our cities, especially India and Asian cities, which are at a developing stage. Now, what is happening with most Asian cities that we are in a very different stage of development. And this development requires, low cost energy, which is mostly fired by coal-fired power plants. And we also have a very huge level of vehicular emissions and vehicular exhaust, because we are growing cities. These are growing cities, and there's a lot of need for mobility. We do not have a strategic mobility planning, which is why we are reliant on private vehicles, which are also, in terms of fuel efficiency, they are mostly fueled by diesel. And then third is, of course, we have growing cities, and what growing cities mean, there is unplanned construction. So I think the question here is not whether Indian cities are more polluted than the rest of the world or not. The question is why is it as polluted? Do we need similar strategic interventions that have happened in the West or in the global North? or are we doing enough? I think that is where we need to start the discussion rather than talking about, ranks. The second thing I want to point out, which I won't take time because I know you have a lot of questions for me, but the second thing I want to point out is that it's very, very difficult to say whether one city is more polluted than another because it is based on data, and data may not be equivalent for all cities. So we might have more polluted cities which actually are not being monitored. So it's very, very it's not a very scientific process to actually rank cities based on what the data is available. So let me give you a small example. Like Delhi, for instance, has about over 40 monitoring stations. Place like Ghaziabad has 4 or 5. I don't know the exact number, but that's the comparison. But the Ghaziabad monitoring stations are placed mostly in the industrial areas. So obviously you do not get a holistic picture. And that's how Ghaziabad tops the list of polluted cities. I think last year it was the topmost city. So I think the question again, we come back is, do we have adequate data to justify whether a city is polluted or not and how polluted it is? Maybe it could be more polluted than actually being, the data that we have. So I think it's very important for us and of course for young people like yourselves to not to get carried away by the issue of which city is more polluted or not. And what we need to really focus on is how do we address this pollution and where do we go from this data that we have in front of us today.
Right. Thank you for giving our audience a whole new perspective, a wider perspective to tell us how we look into this problem. So my next question is, can you tell our audience what are the 5 main causes of air pollution in India and how can youth come into action to reduce its impact?
So that's an easy question because I think most Indian cities have the similar sources as far as air pollution is concerned, and primarily vehicular exhaust leads to emissions. Then you have large industries including power, which is the reason for most of the air pollution that is happening. You have smaller industries. Some of the cities like Delhi NCR, around Delhi NCR for instance, the brick kilns are a huge contribute hugely because of outdated technology, including the small and medium scale industries which may have not very efficient technology. So that's another cause of air pollution. You have biomass burning of urban waste, which contributes to air pollution. And of course, you have resuspended dust on the roads, which is either due to again vehicles or construction dust that flies to the roads and is collected there. Then you also have construction dust, and at a minor level you have say diesel generator sets, which are leading to a lot of pollution. In the rural areas, it's household energy, unclean cooking sources, which increase mostly the indoor. But if you look at air, there are no boundaries. So the indoor and the outdoor is sometimes difficult to differentiate between. But I want to also mention that air pollution is complicated, and you cannot only have local sources. So you also have transboundary sources. For instance, most of you who know Delhi know that as the winter sets in, most of the air pollution is happening from in and around Delhi, where there's a lot of agricultural waste burning, and as I said, there are no boundaries. So I think there are multiple sources, but what is the challenge is that you need very, very focused scientific studies to define what is the major source or what are the major sources of air pollution in a particular city. For instance, if you look at a city like Delhi, you have had source apportionment studies, which is how you define the sources, quite regularly. So which is why you can pinpoint the percentage of emissions in terms of a source. So you, like for a city like Delhi, it's about 30% is actually from vehicular exhaust, vehicular emissions, and 20% is from biomass burning. Similarly, 20% is from road dust. So you have very clear figures, and then you can find ways of addressing it. But you might not have that for many cities in the country. And I'd just like to mention here that one of the major policies and programs of the Government of India, the National Clean Air Program, actually mandates the 132 cities, which are considered non-attainment cities to conduct source opportunity studies so that the sources can be identified. Because although you have this larger picture where you have multiple sources, it might so happen that certain cities have the emissions from a particular source is much higher, so might need to focus on solutions on that particular sector. Of course, the larger way of addressing air pollution would be, to looking at an integrated approach. But definitely, like if you have within a city 40% of the emissions coming from power plants, then that is the problem in that particular city.
And how can youth be come into action to reduce the impact?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good question, and I really like that question because I want to I want to explain here. I think there's a lot of talk that we're not addressing air pollution, and India's first air pollution regulation was in 1981, and after that there hasn't really been much revision. But fortunately for us, 2019, the National Clean Air Program was defined, and it puts in, at least a set of guidelines in terms of how cities can address air pollution. Now, the challenge of air pollution is that air is not just about air. If you look at the solutions, they go in beyond air. So, you'll have to look at mobility solutions. You'll have to look at how you manage your waste. You have to look at, how you do your construction, how do you reduce, the dust from construction. So every source is actually, about a very, very specific and very complicated sector. So air pollution management is not a simple issue. And as I told you in my, as a response to my earlier question where you asked me about the sources, cities have different, there are different levels. So I think in terms of, we might not have adequate data for air pollution. That could be the first big problem. And I think there is a lot of activities that youth can participate in generating data. And where you have data, how do you make this data known? Because I think much as you, me, and this small community, which is very concerned about air or environmental issues or climate change, we do talk about these issues a lot. But if you go down on the ground, the people who are on the roads, I think the issue of air or understanding air quality and its impact on your health is not as evident or as well known, or that it should be known much more so that people become more concerned. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for youth to participate in citizen science activities and generating data, and also making people understand about this information on air quality. And I think with your fantastic communication skills and your today you have social media, I think you can play a major role in promoting understanding of air pollution and its impact on our own health. So that is one area probably where I think there's intervention can be made, large interventions can be made by the youth. The second area is that, for a country like India, we do need local solutions. And I think there's a lot of advancement in the technology sector. There are a lot of young people today who are working, in startups and trying to find solutions. So I think air also needs a lot of financing. Air quality management needs a lot of financing. So we do need local, low-cost solutions that can be applicable. And I feel that innovation and technology, innovation in processes, innovation in energy management or mobility management, I think these are some areas that would really, really benefit from new interventions, which I feel can come from the startup innovation space, which is today largely being driven by youth. The third area that I feel that youth can play a role is getting more and more people together, because I think the voice of youth is today very important. And we can see this with Fridays for Future and Greta Thunberg, who has mobilized such a large youth community to drive policy. Because I think ultimately a lot of air quality management issues are with regulation and how we enforce the regulation. So the more we drive the regulation and the more we drive public in terms of understanding that enforcement is essential, I think we would be able to achieve air quality goals, because I think it's a very complicated issue. So multiple interventions, multiple voices, and of course more positive, passionate voices to clean the air would really drive the process of clean air for Indian cities.
Thank you so much for telling us so many areas where we can do, and there are so many opportunities coming up in this. So my next question for you is, so recently I came across this video which showed that people are shifting from cities like Delhi to their native places because of unbreathable air in the city. Shifting cities can be a temporary solution. What, according to you, is a long-lasting solution to this problem, and how can one start implementing it on a personal level?
So, firstly, I think, Sana, I want to say that I don't think shifting cities is even a solution, because if you look at, I think The Economist had on the cover page about 2 months back that there is no safe place to go. It was a very interesting cover, of just something in the middle of a sea, and the question is, where do you go? And today, I mean, you said that people are shifting to hometowns. If, for instance, if my hometown is Lucknow, and moving out of Delhi is not to Lucknow, I don't think solves the problem. If it's Dehradun, I mean, even if you look at states like Uttarakhand and all, today there is a lot of, it's not like there's no air pollution there. I want to give you a very personal example. I grew up in Shillong in Meghalaya, and Shillong, when we were growing up, I don't think we had even heard of air pollution. And today, when I go back to Shillong, it's as bad as any other city in the country. And so I think, firstly, we must understand that urban migration, or moving, or climate migration, or air pollution migration, or whatever you call it, is not the solution. And I think at some point of time or the other, we will understand, if there's data generated from more cities, that there is no safe place to go to. So I think we have to start cleaning up the air in our cities. And for that, I mentioned certain sources. I think there is a huge role to play in terms of individual action, individual choices, and our consumption patterns. So I think that is something that we need to understand, because everything is linked. The choice of mobility that you take, it contributes at some point of time to air pollution. And as I have often heard this, because I'm a great believer in individual action, and I have often heard this, that, oh, so okay, how is just me doing the right thing, or me walking to my workplace going to make any difference? But we must try to understand, like, there are 5 of us here. If one me decides to tell 5 yous or 4 yous, that you need to do, you need to take a more sustainable mobility, you make a more sustainable mobility choice, and then again the 5 of us talk to another 5, I think that's how the numbers increase, right? So I think while we have the policies, we must try to also understand that enforcement sometimes is not possible, because we are also trying to break rules. And that is where probably I think there's a large role for individual choices, and how we can contribute. And of course, as I mentioned in my as a response to my last question, that I think the other individual action that we can all participate in is trying to generate more data, communicating more data, building more awareness, because I think the information flow is also something that needs to accelerate. Many countries which have achieved clean air have done because of the huge public engagement and public uproar, and people expressing the need for clean air, which I feel, although we do have it in certain cities, in certain pockets, or within certain communities, is not enough. For instance, air forget air, I think even environment has never been a political issue. I mean, it has never been the reason for voting. So I think we would achieve a lot if it had become, or any particular issue. I mean, how much is climate change in India considered when you choose, your country head, the person to rule your country? So I think we need to really reach that level, and that's probably one aspect that really needs to be worked on. And there again, I see a huge role for youth.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering all the questions so patiently. Now I would like to call upon my colleague Brinda to ask the further questions.
Thank you, Sana. So, ma'am, we've spoken a lot about solutions, be it like temporary, and that we need to be more and more sort of focused on individual effort and intention as well. But like when it comes to solutions to carbon dioxide emissions in particular, we've seen like increase in popularity of e-vehicles, electric vehicles. So are electric vehicles and electric cars, in your opinion, sort of important or like essential in helping reduce the carbon footprint?
Vrinda, coming from a conservative environmental background, I wouldn't say electric vehicles is a solution for air pollution or for reducing CO2 emissions. And I want to defend what I say by giving you 2 points in this aspect. See, we really need to understand how the electricity is being generated. So ultimately, if the electricity is being generated, through coal power plant, coal-fired power plant, then obviously, we're ultimately going back to square one, right? So I think the source of electricity is very important. And the second is, I touched upon consumption, and I talked about, product, the entire environment, an entire process of production. So if your EV manufacturing process is not clean, and if the technology you're using is not right, or I don't know how much but there's this concept of circular economy right now. It's about generation of waste and things like that. Ultimately, we are going back to square one, because we're just producing something which we consider clean, but then if we are going to produce it in a large scale, we are again making the same mistakes that we have made so far. So it's not a question of either or. I think what is important is to understand that mobility is, again, not just about a change of technology or a change of fuel, because shifting to clean fuel or shifting to, say, from a diesel car to electric vehicle is a short-term choice. What we actually need is, what we call in the transportation community, avoid, shift, improve. So the first is, how do you avoid the need for this unnecessary mobility? And the second is, how do you shift from the clean to the from the unclean to the clean? And the third is, of course, how do you improve mobility situations? So I think if you have to look at the avoid, shift, improve strategy, we will have to look at designing our cities better, rather than just proposing a technology solution. And when I say designing a city better, it is about looking at cities where non-motorized transport is accessible and the choice of people. And if you look at the cities which have managed to deal with air pollution, I think they're the cities which have very minimal private car transportation, and maximum of walking, maximum of city design that promotes walking and cycling, and even reduced mobility. I mean, accessibility. Like if you have what you call say, not cities and towns that expand laterally, but in a circular manner, so that your need to move is less. So I think ultimately we have to. I mean, while technology solutions are definitely the need of the hour, and we do need clean technology. I'm not saying we don't. I mean, we should shift away from technology, but I think that's not the long-term solution. Electric vehicles are a short-term solution. We have to look at the entire production process, the concept of circular economy, how do we integrate these issues, and also the source of the electricity before we really say, oh, well, here's the solution for air pollution and climate change.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that really does make sense. And what you spoke about, the places that have sort of really integrated like a better change in sort of air pollution, etc., are those that have like enable accessible sort of transportation and
Right.
the choice of the citizen as well. So yes, that really kind of is an important factor that I guess is kind of overlooked quite a bit. Moving forward from that, you mentioned that there is quite a bit that we can do, and individually as well as sort of like organizationally, and because of the amount of data and amount of sort of work that is to be done, there is sort of a sense of overwhelm that might be, um, something that a lot of people experience. And considering you've been active in the field of sort of environmental impact for many years now, have you ever felt ecological distress, or as we've learned, as we've come to learn of it as eco anxiety? Have you ever felt it, and how do you deal with it?
Okay, that's an interesting question. So I chose environment as a career in 1994, and it's almost like 30 years in this environmental space. And believe me, when I chose environmental to work in environment, it was definitely not what my parents wanted me to do. So, and also, I didn't really, get paid even decently enough to sustain myself at the time, right? But so looking back, from how much there was an understanding and awareness of the environment and the impact on the environment. I'm not saying that we were still damaging the environment then. We were just not conscious about it. The issues were different. The issues were conservation. We were cutting down forests. So they were slightly different from what they are. But ultimately, that's what has led to where we are today, right? So the issue of ecological distress or eco anxiety, actually, I don't think I've had that, because I think uh, I I actually tend to look at it very positively now, because I think, today the awareness, the information, the interest on environmental issues and wanting to do something is definitely much more. And if you look at it, I speak again for the younger generation, schools as well as the youth. I think we have in front of us a very conscious and very aware generation. I noticed that young people like yourselves understand what sustainable mobility choices are, and given a choice, you would obviously prefer that to a non-conducive to environmental kind of issues mobility choice. So I think from that perspective, I'm very positive that that we have reached a place where the awareness, information, especially within the educated and youth, has really increased, and there is a lot of now mobilization power to improve the environment and address issues like climate change. The second is, I think there is a lot of specialist knowledge now which wasn't there when we were studying or working in environment. Today you talk about climate change and you have multiple disciplines within climate change which can contribute. I mean, something like climate financing, for instance, was never discussed some years back, but today we are talking about how to build financing to kind of to improve climate action and drive climate action. So I think the sectoral increase in improvement in sectoral knowledge is going to help a lot in contributing to making the world a better place. The third aspect, why I feel that I think if you I come from a very conservative environmental background, right? So I'm pretty aware of the fact that you don't see the results immediately. I mean, the damage is something that is easier, because if you look at a small example of cutting down the tree, you can do it in a couple of hours, but actually to grow a large tree, how much time does it take, right? So if you use that as an example, I think the impact on on improving the environment is a slow process. So if you are going to have ecological distress or ecological anxiety, I don't think you'll be able to work in this space. So you have to keep driving yourself and find positive ways to work and kind of continue to be motivated to work for a better, for a greener planet, a better planet.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, and that does make sense. Like finding a driving factor is, I think, it could be generalized as well in any sort of your concentrated stream of interest. Is a very essential factor. With that, thank you for answering my question so patiently. I'd like to pass it on to Akriti.
Thank you, Brinda. All right, I think I come from Delhi, so I will put up a question to an expert. And this topic is nearly so close to my heart that I fight with my relatives about it every year. Every pre-Diwali season, we have school campaigns, no crackers, say no to crackers. There are also protests happening around. We see big pictures on the internet, posters saying that. And there's a lot of awareness before Diwali, and it has been there for so many years. But when you check your pollution level on the day of Diwali, you just lose it all. So, where is this gap? Is this gap cultural, or is this gap because of lack of interest? Or is this gap because, as you said in the earlier questions, because this is not just about air pollution, it's a lot of factors. But this gap is there consistently. I don't know, I don't know if you celebrated Diwali. Did you ever have so much pollution? So how is this gap increasing now of our awareness levels and then our action towards it?
I don't want to get into the complexity of culture and the commercialization of festivals, because that will take us on a different track. But I think I'd like to go back to this whole question of while I said that youth and people like yourselves are very conscious about what's happening to the environment, I think a larger section of India still believes that the environment needs us more than we need the environment. And I think that is one of the basic premise that is where we need to kind of think about the, how do we communicate the message that when we're burning crackers and, we're celebrating for the fun of the moment, we're actually harming ourselves. I mean, you're encouraging your child to, to say burst a cracker. And I've, as you said, Akriti, I think I've seen this, there's bans, but I've seen it that you have in the societies, the chairmans and the presidents encouraging a collective burning, and they actually have cracker burning time period where when that there is a ban. So I think it's again a question of how tough enforcement is, and ban is never going to be successful, because if we force something on the community, it more or less isn't going to work at some point of time or the other, because ultimately it's about understanding that by asking a community not to burst crackers or burn fireworks, we are actually not saying you're destroying the environment, but we are actually saying you're destroying yourselves and you are part of the environment. And I think which is why I think it's very important to accelerate the health and air pollution, climate change discussion. And one of the challenges is that we do not have enough health data, or we do not publicize enough health data. So for instance, if you start talking about how many people have lungs related or throat related disorders after Diwali, or how many toddlers suffer from breathing issues and other kind of health issues, I think that kind of data is going to be more more hard hitting than just saying that, oh, the air is so bad, and the government banned and the ban didn't work, and talk about these issues. So I think one of the challenges in India is that we do not have adequate health data related to environmental impact. And let me give you a small example. I think since you're from Delhi, and we have been propagating the use of masks in Delhi, especially in the winter season, for many years now. I think we talk about air pollution being severe, and even on severe days, we have parents sending children out to play and not really thinking. I mean, even if they do think, they probably think you need the exercise, so you need to send people out to play, right?
Yeah.
But when COVID struck and the pandemic struck, today we are all wearing masks because we are worried about the whole health factor, the death factor. So I think one of the areas that really needs work is how do we improve the understanding that we as humans are part of the environment and need the environment. It's not that the environment needs us, because the environment can survive without us. It's just, we're the ones who need the environment. So I think that debate needs to be really accelerated, especially in the context of health, and for where we do need health data, health related data, especially in terms of these issues like air pollution and climate change, and how it's impacting our health, especially the vulnerable communities like the younger children and the older generation.
Yeah, I love your response about it, that changing the understanding concept of, the environment doesn't need us always, but we are a part of the consequence more so than the environment. I think we could work up to it, definitely. All right. Since you're working in a company which is actually climate action oriented, I would like to know, and for our viewers as well, an example of clean air solution, so to say, delivered from Clean Air Asia to combat climate change. Any example, it could be anything.
So that's a very pertinent question, and I don't know if you know. Yesterday, the WHO released their new guidelines after many years, where they have mentioned reduced limits for air pollutants. But what is very encouraging is that they have also mentioned pollutants like black carbon and methane and ozone, which are also climate pollutants, need to be looked into in terms of good practice management. So while the air pollution community has been talking about addressing climate pollution, climate related issues, and understanding it from the perspective of co-benefits by addressing both air pollution and climate change, the whole debate of this co-benefit debate hasn't reached to the level that it should actually do. So I think one of the areas that Clean Air Asia is also working on is to look at what we call the short-lived climate pollutants, and some of the short-lived climate pollutants are the ones that I've just told you about, and these are actually also responsible for air pollution. So how do you reduce both? And if you look at it, the solutions are again the same. They're either mobility solutions or energy solutions. So we do not have an either or solution. What Clean Air Asia works on is an integrated approach. We facilitate air quality management plans in cities so that cities can identify, as I said earlier, what is the main source of air pollution, and then we look at strategies for reducing air pollution, which includes the element of communication and looking at health impact assessments, so that you have an integrated approach. And finally, looking at governance mechanisms. So one of the things that is encouraging for India at the moment is that the National Clean Air Program identifies 132 non-attainment cities. A non-attainment city is a city that has not met the air quality standards for a particular time period. And these 132 cities now have been mandated to make clean air action plans. So Clean Air Asia has been supporting some of these cities to develop these clean air action plans, which looks at strategic interventions in mobility, in waste management, in energy interventions, industry in industry technology choices, and other areas like reducing road and construction dust. So that's one area that we are helping cities work in. The other area is the institutional capacity in the country is still very poor. Like, for instance, you have pollution control boards, but there is probably one or two staff who is looking at air pollution, and it might be clubbed with all the other pollution, environmental pollution areas. So what happens is that the person doesn't really have the time to engage in the sectoral strategies, which are solutions. So Clean Air Asia has developed, capacity building modules, which are relevant to Indian context, and basically train people who are not just in the air pollution sector, so which not just the pollution control boards, but actually going into the cities where the implementation happens. So people who are involved in, say, mobility planning, people who are involved in city development, and how do you actually help them understand air in the context of, integrating it within their plans and implementation strategies. The third area that we are working in is what we call informing public, which means the whole idea of sharing more data, making this information more useful. We have a very interesting project where we are monitoring air quality in terms of particulate matter in school play areas. So the idea was to look at what is a good time to go out to play, because most of the play hours are usually early in the morning, which may not be the right time, because that might be the time when there is a lot of particulate matter. So how do you encourage say a school or a parent community to understand the air pollution levels, and maybe a short-term solution of staggering the playtime, and so that children are not exposed to air pollution when the air pollution is very severe. So these are some of the areas where we look at integrated solutions, and what we try to do is bring all these elements into the air quality management plan, so that you have multiple intervention areas that can help improve air quality in the city.
Awesome. I have more respect for an organization like Clean Air Asia, because I think what I love about the answer is that it is data-centric, science-centric, and then also the practicality of it. Like just you said, what time could the children be best outside, or that's really close to the real life scenario. So just love that. And now I have to ask the last question. So we did a bit of research, and we read that you said somewhere you believe in the power of youth. And for the young climate warriors, I want to ask you, just before we end this interview, any one impactful message, especially for the younger climate warriors, to be actionable for SDG 13. If that one message comes out from you, we'd be happy to share it with everyone.
Yeah, so before I go to my concluding message, I also want to tell you about something that is, very inspiring for me as someone who's been, working in this environmental space. And because it's driven by youth, I feel that, I believe in the power of youth. So, we a couple of years back, I think about 4 years back, we did a hackathon with the technology schools of India. About 22 schools participated. The hackathon was organized to look at an app, for an innovative app which would basically not just talk about air quality, but also go a step further. So the winning app, of course, was an app which has a pledge component. It's called VAYU, which means, and the acronym stands for Value Air You Use. So basically, you understand what the air quality is, and then you make a pledge in terms of what you want to do to promote clean air. And this was an idea that came from youth like yourselves. And I'm And at the end of the 2-day hackathon, a couple of young people like yours came up to me and said that, we loved doing this work and we'd really like to continue to work in air quality. And that's how the Youth Clean Air Network of Clean Air Asia was launched. We launched it that day, and I had this brainwave and I said, okay, let's call it YCAN, like Youth Can, and it becomes Youth Clean Air Network. And so I want to actually emphasize on the multiplier effect, and that's where my end message comes in. So YCAN began 4 years back in one of our rooms in Delhi, and youngsters, mostly technology background youngsters, used to come here, have conversations, give us ideas in terms of how you look at solutions for clean air. And then slowly, communication students joined in, so campaigns came out. And what was really, really very interesting was that many of the youngsters who were part of YCAN were not from Delhi, so they moved out. And they wrote to me that, can I start YCAN in Gandhinagar, in Kochi, and in Bangalore? So, we had these young leaders who came up with these, with this very innovative and inspirational ideas. And today, I think we have a YCAN presence in about 10 cities in India, and we want to now also go beyond India. So my message to youth is that, don't look at us for all the answers, because I think you have many more answers. And don't look at us as inspirational leaders, because sometimes we need your inspiration, and the drive and energy and positivism that is there in youth can actually, while we can serve in guiding a process, what is the energy required for meeting the challenges of climate, air, and overall environment. I think the solutions lie in each one of you. And I think this is where individual youth power, youth action is going to go a long way. And I'm really positive in terms of, if youth take charge, I think we would be able to, find all kinds of solutions to the major environmental problems that we are facing today.
Awesome.
I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. It totally does. And it also gives us a sense of responsibility, not just because that we would be the innovators of solutions, but also having a sense of responsibility for the next generation as the youth of today is really touching. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, team. Thank you so much, Prarthana, for answering the questions so patiently and insightfully. I would just mention two key learnings, which I think everyone should take away from this session. The one, especially for the youth today with the increasing social media tagline pressure, is that not always being carried away, as you said, by the comparative approach, let's say, which city ranks best or the worst, and rather ignoring that and diving deep to understand what are the factors which are leading to that ranking. Maybe that is more focus. The second thing is also you talked about understanding the sources of alternative solutions. For example, e-vehicles. You made a very valid point, which is to not just look at the alternative as the e-car or e-vehicle, but the alternative is powered with something, the energy to it as a source. We need to look deeper into it. And the last one, I think I loved, the multiplier effect and the power of youth in doing individual action could actually completely change the trajectory of countries, be them developing, developed, or established countries like Japan in the space of climate action, so to say. So that, I think, were the key learnings for everyone today. And on this note, I would like to wrap up. And you all can stay tuned to our YouTube channel, Sustainable Advancements, for more content and information on sustainable development goals. Hope you loved this session, and we'll meet next time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you all.